In today's presentation, we'll walk through a typical workflow from the time a patient checks in to the time a patient checks out, focusing primarily on the clinical flow within an EMR. While designing EMR, our main focus was on the customizability and flexibility it should lend to the user by simulating the manual environment onto an electronic format, i.e. EMR. And the first evidence of this customizability and user-friendliness is the dashboard. Depending on your role and your practice workflow, you can customize your own dashboard. So for example, a front desk dashboard may have daily schedule and patient status, whereas a nurse's dashboard may have other elements on it in addition to daily schedule and patient status, such as patient messages and tasks. To create your own dashboard, simply click on Create New Dashboard and name it as you wish. For example, My Dashboard. And then select the formation of its appearance. For example, 2 rows by 2 columns. Click on Next, and then select from the drop-down what you would like to see on your dashboard. Daily schedule, patient status, patient messages, and pending documents. Click on Next and Finish, and you will now have your own dashboard. We will now walk through a typical workflow starting from the time a patient checks in. In order to check in a patient, highlight the patient Jane Smith and click on the check-in button, which will open the check-in window with patient's information displayed in this window. Depending on your workflow, you may choose to update patient detail by clicking on this patient registration and updating insurance information or adding any other information, as well as scanning documents. If you collect and post copay at the time of check-in, click on this copay button and post the appropriate copay amount, as well as print the receipt by checking this Yes checkbox and clicking on OK. If you're done with all of that, or you didn't have to do any of that, you click on OK, and the patient will now appear in patient status, denoting that the patient has checked in along with the check-in time. This status would be displayed on all the dashboards as long as patient status is there. So if you look at the nurse's dashboard, we also see that patient Jane Smith's status of check-in is available on the nurse's dashboard. Next, we will room in the patient by highlighting Jane Smith and clicking on the Room In button. Assigning the room number, however you name them, Exam Room 1, Consult 1, and then selecting the nurse, which is rooming in the patient, and clicking on OK, which will now change the status of the patient to Room In, along with the room in time and the Exam Room 1, where the patient has been roomed. Again, this status would be available on all the different dashboards. So if you look at a front desk dashboard, we can see the color changing as well as the status changing to Room In along with the Exam Room 1. Next, the nurse would start the clinical process within SQL EMR is denoted by clicking on the Start Process button, which opens the Start Process window, capturing all the information that was captured at the time of check-in and room-in. In addition, the nurse can assign a chief complaint or multiple chief complaints from a drop-down of chief complaints. For example, we will select asthma over here, which is now linked to templates within the system made available to you at the time of implementation and training. You may choose to have these chief complaints linked to various templates, or select Show All Templates, which will show all the different templates that are available to you based on your specialty. In this case, as mentioned earlier, we will select the asthma template and click on OK to start the clinical process. In SequelMed EMR, the templates are comprised of various sections. For example, vital signs, history of presenting illness, history, review of systems, physical exam, assessment, and plan. And these sections can be customized according to the requirements of your template. You can add to them, modify them on the fly, as well as at the time of pre-implementation. Once the template is open, the nurse will then start the entry of the various elements. So for example, if we start with vital signs, notice that the height and weight is already populated since this is an existing patient. Any other additional information can be inputted. For example, blood pressure 120/80, respiratory rate is 19, temperature 99.5, pulse 74. And notice that as this was being entered, it also is showing concurrently as a sentence view, which can be viewed here as well as separately in the sentence view. Within the sentence view, you can also make changes while reviewing your progress note. For example, if you wanted to change this value from 120 to 124, you will just right mouse click and change this value, which will also persist in the form view. Next, the nurse would move on to the history, which can be moved right next to the vital signs. Here, the nurse will continue to take history. In this case, given this is an existing patient, the history is already pre-populated. Of course, you can always add other elements if the historical facts have changed. Moving on to the history of presenting illness, we started with asthma. In addition, we will document dyspnea, tightness of chest, shortness of breath, nocturnal cough, wheezing, and yellow sputum production. Notice that there is a comments box next to each element, which allows you to enter any additional information either by typing with mouse and keyboard, or you can use tablet PC with a stylus pen or voice recognition. The benefit of having this comments box is the ability to add anything in its proper place. Next, we'll assume that the nurse is done with her part and now the doctor is ready to examine the patient. So the nurse will change the status to ready for doctor, which will now update the status on the dashboard also. So if we go to the doctor's dashboard, we will see that the status has changed to ready for doctor, and now the doctor can examine the patient. The doctor can then highlight the patient and click on Open Visit, which will open the visit to where the nurse left off. The doctor can then review what has already been documented either in the sentence view or in the form view, and continue with the rest of the documentation. Starting with the review of systems, the doctor can document all the systems according to the clinical presentation of the patient. For example, constitutional, chills, cough, fatigue, fever. There's no weakness, no weight gain, and no weight loss. And notice that this will be documented in the sentence view accordingly. Patient has chills, cough, fatigue, fever, no weakness, no weight gain, and no weight loss. The physician can then proceed with the rest of the systems and review them accordingly. Similarly, physical exam can also be documented based on the template requirements and the way the physical exam section had been constructed. For example, in the case of respiratory exam, breath sounds are normal, percussion is normal, and no auscultation is also normal. Sentence view will show it accordingly. On examination, normal breath sounds, normal percussion, and normal auscultation. Having completed the subjective and objective examination of the patient, the physician can move on to the assessment section, which is comprised of three smaller sections: chief complaint, as documented initially at the time of start process as well as in the HPI section, a problem list, and what are today's assessments. From a drop-down customized list, the physician can choose today's assessment, for example, asthma, and also add it to the problem list by dragging and dropping